Okay, so I would like to start off by welcoming all of you and thanking you for spending your Saturday afternoon with us. It looks like spring has finally heard our call and is on its way, so we're very thankful. I think that snowfall that we had last month was the direct result of Vancouver Islanders thumbing our nose at the rest of the country for too long, and we got our comeuppance. Trust me, Eastern Canada is laughing at us. I'd also like to acknowledge that we are holding today's meeting on the traditional and unceded territory of the Cowichan people, and I'm very thankful for the fantastic relationship that I have, and indeed many of us in this room have, with Cowichan tribes and their continued leadership. Just a few housekeeping items. If anyone needs to use the washrooms, they're just outside the door here. We're going to try and have this meeting wrap up by about 3 p.m. Try to respect your time. And also, we'll try and get to as many questions and comments as we can. But if there's anything further that you wish to talk about, we have these comment forms that are available, and my office can collect those from you when we conclude today's meeting. So, on to why we're here today, and the fact that, I wanted to host a town hall on the development of a national clean energy strategy. I've always actually had an interest in the field related to energy production. In fact, I can remember during my nomination campaign, one of the questions was, if you could have a choice over a ministry, which one would you choose? And I right away said natural resources, because I think that if you look at the abundant forms of energy that we are so lucky to have all around this world, the fact that, our sun in less than an hour sends enough energy to Earth to power all of humanity's energy needs for an entire year, the fact that everywhere around the world you can see the wind is blowing. We have a huge moon through its gravitational power, which is directing the tides. We have rivers running in many different countries, and below our feet we have the incredible power and furnace of the Earth's core, which is providing that geothermal energy. So it's all around us, and fossil fuels, as we know, are causing a lot of damage to our country. That's the second reason why we're here today. First of all, to acknowledge the abundant energy that we have around us. But second of all, to talk about why we need to embark on this path. And I think everyone in this room, because I know the Cowichan Valley based on your correspondence, I think everyone in this room is very well aware of the fact that the writing is on the wall for us, that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has come to the realization that we do not have as much time as we originally thought. And if we continue down our current trend, our current course of action, we are going to look at a very significantly altered world. And our national media is picking up on that. We start to see stories like this on CBC. We can see the National Post running stories like this. CBC again, and so on. So I think before we get into the solutions, we have to have a full understanding of the problem. If we continue down our current trend, the projections are that by the end of this century, we could see anywhere from a 2 to 6 degree rise in temperature. There are some variances. But, when you think about a slight increase in temperature, 15 to 20 degrees doesn't sound like that much, but we're talking about over long-term trends and their persistent effects on our climate. And the last time our planet went through these kind of temperature changes, they happened over millions of years, and life had time to adjust. There were, of course, some periods where it happened quite dramatically, and we know the result of those dramatic changes. There were some mass extinctions, and life on Earth was changed irreversibly. So just to give you a sense of, when we're talking about a 1 degree rise in temperature, these are some of the things we will see as a result. But it gets worse. This is what happens when we see 2 degrees. 4. And the worst case, 5. So, you know, Ottawa is sometimes a very frustrating place to work. I keep trying. I'm in politics because I'm an inherently optimistic person. But, you know, when I see the debate bogged down over whether we should put in a carbon tax or not, and it completely ignores these realities, because we're talking about what the economic costs are now, but we're not talking about what the economic costs of doing nothing are. Right? I mean, you look at the changes that will happen to agricultural production around the world, the coastal inundation, the droughts, the floods, the forest fires, the mass climate migration that's going to happen. And we're not talking a few $billion here. The Stern report that was issued by the United Kingdom back in the 1990s said it could cost upwards of 20% of the world's GDP. So we're not talking billions, we're talking trillions of dollars in costs. So that's the kind of thing that we have to keep in mind, because sometimes it's useful to employ economic arguments to reach a wider audience. The costs of doing nothing are going to far outweigh the costs of what the eventual result will be. I mean, the cost of doing nothing will be far outweigh the results of any costs that we choose to transition. But fortunately, and I'm very thankful to have some fantastic panelists here today, we do have options. As I mentioned, those sources of renewable energy and clean alternative energy are all around us. Now, our federal government has come in with some options. I've already talked about the carbon tax. I think, you know, putting a price on pollution is something we absolutely must consider. We need to change people's behavior. We need to provide incentives for correcting that behavior. Our federal government has offered billions of dollars in previous budgets for a low carbon economy fund, investments in public transit, investments in green infrastructure, all worthy things, I agree. But when you see some of the other things that are continuing under this government's watch, the fact that Canada is leading the G7 in our oil and gas subsidies, we're the proud owners of a bitumen exporting pipeline, and we want to spend upwards of $11 billion more to expand its capacity by triple the amount, with the writing that's on the wall, right? And of course, our own federal scientists have acknowledged that under our current policies, it's going to be impossible for us to meet our Paris goals. Only 11 short years away. So let's stop talking about current policies, about what the dreadful effects of climate change are, and let's start talking about solutions. And so I've got a great bunch of people up here, and I would like to start off by introducing Brian Roberts. Brian Roberts, I'm sure many of you know, involved with Cowichan Energy Alternatives, the Cowichan Biodiesel Co-op, and just really has been focusing so much of his life on implementing local solutions, tangible solutions for our community to be a part of. And I've certainly learned a lot from his presentations. I've been lucky to know him for a few years. And I'd like you to extend a warm welcome to Brian as he does a bit of a presentation for us.
Well, thanks so much for coming. And on a beautiful sunny Saturday like today, it always impresses me, the Cowichan Valley, seeing the faces that come out to support events like this, and really to show that these things matter to them. So thanks so much for coming out and for hearing us today. Many of you already know that I'm the Executive Director of Cowichan Energy Alternatives. This is one of a few organizations I'm involved with, but this is the main one. This is kind of what we call the mothership of all the stuff we do here in the Cowichan Valley. It's where all of us kind of almost local mad scientists go to try and come up with different solutions for global climate change and finding local options for that, things that we can do right here, everything from stuff that we can do in the laboratory with cooking oils, making fuels out of that, to policy changes and really experimental stuff that hasn't been done before is being piloted right here in our laboratory, the Cowichan Valley, and then being exported outside of the community. So main thing that we're really focused on, and I think is a vision we can all get behind, is resilient communities, healthy planet. So the two going hand in hand. And really our mission or our purpose is to empower people to achieve that kind of a planet on a local level, or starting on a local level. And so we do that in a number of different ways. We work with businesses, individuals, local governments, and we have a number of different programs which I'll get into. But the main way that we do that is that there are a lot of people talking about climate change, and unfortunately it's still a debate at this time when we have lots of important work to do. But I have to say that even though that I'm an earth scientist and I've studied this and I used to teach it right here in this university as a teacher in environmental science, it's not what we focus on. We don't focus on talking about climate change anymore. We focus on advocating by doing and trying to provide people with solutions that they can use now to be able to address it. So we feel that there are enough people who believe in this. We need to focus on the actual alternatives and things that we can do about it. That's the main thing that we do. So advocate by doing. And I want to start out, since we have, I'm here the guest of our agriculture critic. I wanted to draw the parallel between, I wanted to draw a relationship between agriculture and energy. And although this is for the United States, it applies pretty much to North America, right? It applies to developed economies throughout the world. And if you look at this, you basically see that from the mid-1800s, or just at the start of the Industrial Revolution, that our dependence on oil, or the fuel component there, the brown component, has steadily increased to the point where, at this time, agricultural production is greater than 90% oil dependent. And that means when oil prices go up, food goes up. And if we stop oil production, we stop eating at this point, because industrial agriculture, which is providing the bulk of the food on the planet, is based on it. And so this says to us that we're a fossil fuel-based civilization, and changing is going to be one of the hardest things that we do as a civilization. And we better get at it. We better see what we can do in each community and in each place and as individuals to be able to make that transition. And one of the things that we really focus on is transportation, and I'll give you some numbers to show you why. 58% of BC's total greenhouse gas emissions, according to the Community Energy Emissions Inventory Report done by the province, 58% of BC's total emissions are from driving, on-road driving. And if you go by the 2015 Climate Leadership Plan, that's about 38%. It's different depending on what you measure and what else you throw into the mix, but it's high. It's by most measures the highest source of emissions in the province. 55% of the capital regional districts' total community emissions come from driving, and even higher in rural areas. In Saanich, 62%. In the Cowichan Valley, it's 72%. So that's huge. And so one of the reasons why we focus so much on transportation at Cowichan Energy Alternatives. The IPCC says without aggressive and sustained mitigative policies being implemented, vehicle emissions may increase at a faster rate than other energy end uses. So this is a big thing. And it's a big thing that we as individuals all have a say over because of our individual driving habits. GHG emissions from commercial and industrial transportation. I'll throw this up because this is a concentrated area where greenhouse gas emissions are associated with transportation and industrial activity. 10% of the CRD's annual emissions come from about 54 million liters of diesel being consumed. 77% of CRD's diesel usage is concentrated in commercial vehicle, tractor, trailer, truck, and bus fleets. So from our perspective, if we're trying to look where the low-hanging fruit is and where we're going to get a lot of bang for our buck, it's focusing on diesel trucks and industry and how we can replace fossil fuel usage in that sector. And so one of the things that a lot of people have been talking an awful lot about is electrify everything, and this being like a silver bullet to solve everything. So let's look at that. So if we were to look at to electrify just the commercial truck fleet in BC, we have a number of different options coming up, and things are looking very promising for being able to do that. But this is just recent research that came out by the Pacific Institute for Climate Solutions. And Sybil Seitzinger gave a presentation at the Langford Town Hall. She's not here today, unfortunately, but she was kind enough to give me some of her slides from the presentation. And this really stood out to me because you can see that basically the red is the amount of extra energy we would need just to electrify the truck fleet in British Columbia. And on the left, you can see there's two different scenarios and how many Site Cs that would take if we just focused on hydroelectric power, looking for these silver bullet solutions to electrify everything, and if we're doing it all from hydropower, clean burning hydropower. And this is Site C right here. This is how much is projected from Site C, and that's how much we're going to need. So I'm not putting this up to denigrate, the electric vehicles or to say that that's not a solution. All I'm saying is that if we're looking for a silver bullet solution, I think we're going to be waiting for a long time. So we have to look at what we've got, where we've got it first. And I really love this analogy called silver buckshot solutions, not silver bullet solutions. And so when I talk about silver buckshot solutions for vehicle emissions, I look at it supporting a shift to electric vehicles and drop in renewable fuels such as ethanol and biodiesel and other renewable options, fuel cells and other things, depending on what you've got, where you've got it, even hydroelectricity like we used to have in Vancouver. The buses were run by hydropower. So some considerations though. A shift to electric vehicles will require a long-term approach and significant investment in new infrastructure such as charging stations. And in some places it's going to be a long time coming, because you think about northern Alberta and northern BC where sometimes it's 1,000 kilometers from town to town. That's well beyond the range of electric vehicles right now. So maybe what's going to work in an urban area is not going to work in rural areas. And again, we saw how big our emissions are related to transportation in the Cowichan Valley, because we're a rural area. We don't have the same transportation options as we do, and things are farther away. So a shift to low-carbon renewable fuels like biodiesel can be achieved quickly, though, with existing vehicle technology. The diesel engine was designed to run on vegetable oil and was later changed to run on the distillates from gasoline production. So biodiesel so it can run on existing vehicle technology and fuel distribution technology as well. So certainly as a transition, drop-in fuels like biodiesel are something that we really need to seriously look at. Observations and conclusions. Transportation represents the largest source of emissions that communities, we as individuals, have the greatest potential to change. Diesel usage by commercial and industrial fleets represents a low-hanging fruit for targeting greenhouse gas reductions. But there's still a lot of people that drive diesels, a lot of people in diesel trucks that have their own maybe construction company, landscaping company. There's still a lot of diesel Volkswagens on the road, Mercedes. Biodiesel is a solution that can be implemented to immediately begin to reduce vehicle emissions, particularly from fleets. And providing multiple renewable options and incentivizing their adoption through systems like carbon pricing by penalizing the bad activities and shifting that money to subsidize the green activities that we want to encourage until they get a leg, until they get the kind of economy scale where they can compete with subsidized petroleum industry. So how are we doing that, us as an organization? Well, we have an ecosystem of organizations, as we like to say, where Cowichan Energy is kind of the foundation. So Cowichan Energy is like this incubator, and we come up, as I say, we're these mad scientists coming up with these ideas, and we're trying them out, and then we're kind of, once they're starting to work, then we kind of let them out in the world and let them live on their own. So Cowichan Energy has been instrumental, I guess, in administering the Cowichan Biodiesel Co-op. The Cowichan Biodiesel Co-op came first, actually starting as a meeting of just people in late 2004, but it led to the formation of Cowichan Energy, which then expanded the mandate and expanded the kind of things we did and became the brain trust of all the stuff that's going on. Ergo Eco Solutions is our newest organization, and it's focused on all the different things that you can do from cooking oil. So it's like research and development goes on there. And if you think about all the things that you can make from petroleum hydrocarbons from oil, solvents, degreasers, paint thinners, all these things, lubricants, you can make all of those from recycled cooking oil, and they're biodegradable, they're non-toxic, and they can be made locally. So that's some of the stuff we're doing with those organizations. And this is kind of our toolbox. These are not organizations, but these are ways that we then share what we do with people and communities. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. I've already told you a bit about Ergo Eco Solutions. So this was just started a couple years ago. It's a spin out from the co-op and Cowichan Energy, focused on waste cooking oil recycling outside of the Cowichan Valley in Saanich, Nanaimo, other areas. So recycled over 1 million liters in the first 2 years. And so the newest eco-solution products, non-toxic biodegradable dust suppressant. So in areas in the Cowichan Valley where you can't use water in the summer to try and keep the dust down, where we're not using, thank God, creosote or other hydrocarbons anymore to spray down on roads, we have a solution there. Green form release and paving release agent. It used to be when they were paving roads, they're driving down the, and basically paving the tar on the roads. They used diesel. They would spray petroleum diesel on the roller and on all the tools as they're driving by ditches and streamlines. So we're finding all of these different areas of potential where we can replace hydrocarbons with something that's non-toxic and biodegradable and that's better for the environment. And there's a number of other things, soaps and other things as well, but I would have to take a lot more time to explain everything. The Cowichan Biodiesel Co-op, very dear to my heart because this is where we started everything. And I believe Jerome Webster, can you put up your hand? Member number 1. Member number 1, the father of the co-op right there. So we came together to basically come up with an ethical, sustainable, locally produced fuel that people could use. And it was shortly after the Gulf War. And so almost the environmental benefits were taken for granted, that we knew there were great environmental benefits to this, but largely this was also a political statement that we want to make sure that the fuel that we're using is not coming from, a country that's been invaded for their resources. Since 2005, we have supplied 350,000 liters of biodiesel to members, reduced emissions by over 1,000 tons. And we have one pump located at Bings Creek Recycling Center. There's a second one coming up, which I'll tell you about in just a minute. So why biodiesel? Most of you kind of know this. I'll go through it really quickly. Nothing showed up. Formatting issue. Okay, biodegradable, non-toxic, can be used now in existing diesel engines, and it can be sourced from a number of different oils, either canola oil, raw canola oil, or recycled cooking oils. And as I said, the first diesel engine was designed to run on vegetable oil so that farmers could grow their own fuel. And then later that engine was changed to run on, as I said, distillates. So now we have to chemically alter the vegetable oil to make it into biodiesel, and then it can run in any diesel engine. These are the environmental benefits. And so if you consider that the horizontal axis there, consider that the baseline, that equals diesel emissions, right? Emissions that you would get from burning diesel fuel. And so if you look at kind of the red magenta color, that is the amount of reductions in emissions that you can achieve just from using a B20 blend. That's just 20% mixed with 80% petroleum diesel. And we look at the kind of purpley blue color, that is when you use B100. And so from this you can see there's 100% reduction in sulfates, which leads to acid rain because it creates sulfuric acid. Total hydrocarbons are reduced significantly over 90%. The PAHs and the NPAHs, that's basically polyaromatic hydrocarbons, which is a fancy way of saying carcinogens, the things that cause cancer. Significant reductions. The only thing that increases, and this graph is for biodiesel made from soy oil, is the NOxes, which also can lead to another greenhouse gas, but also can lead to another type of acid rain. But this can be addressed just by adjusting the timing of the diesel engine, or by using more saturated oils like used cooking oil, like we do. Benefits also, it's carbon neutral. So because it's coming from a plant source that's basically grown in the biosphere already, we're not drilling the hydrocarbons out from oil reservoirs that have been capped for hundreds of millions of years. We're not adding significantly more carbon to the atmosphere, and as long as the next crop of canola is planted the next year, everything is sequestered again. So carbon neutral. And there are mechanical benefits too, which you cannot see because the formatting doesn't show this, but it's got a higher cetane, it's better lubricity, it allows your engine to run quieter and longer, so your engines last longer. Diesel engines last longer anyways, they're already more fuel efficient than gasoline engines, and so they run smoother, quieter, last longer, and of course I've already talked about the emissions benefits. So how we get that to people? So if you think about it, we're like the smallest integrated oil company on the planet, probably. We're trying to do all the things that the Shells and the Exxons do, and we're just doing it in a completely different, sustainable way. So instead of drilling for oil, we recycle cooking oil. Instead of refining that in a big $1 billion refinery, we do it in our little microbrewery facility at Bings Creek. And we have to come up with our own gas stations, though. This is pretty challenging for us, and we have to do it without the billions of dollars that an integrated oil company has. And so we've been pretty good at doing this by being able to salvage pumps, like when a gas station switches over the pumps, we can get these excellent pumps, brand new. They may just not have the tap technology, but we can get them at kind of pennies on the dollar, and then we can set them up to be blending pumps. And this one is going to be set up at Couch and Petroleum Sales. This is going to be our newest upgrade. It's going to be completely convenient. You can access it with a credit card, and so this one will be open to the public as well. With a benefit, actually, a discount given to any co-op member who accesses it. The right biodiesel blend for any diesel car or truck is available. Superior mechanical benefits without compromising vehicle performance. Convenient, easy to use. A fill and go choice that people can use now with existing diesel engine technology. And biodiesel blends now, we're selling B20 for cheaper than we're selling diesel at the same pump. And this pump will be opening soon at Allenby Road. We're looking at probably the end of April at the latest, once this one is upgraded. And so here's just some testimonials we've had. Everyone from farmers to vehicle fleets have used it. We've had bus companies use 100% biodiesel and have no problems. So that's one of the things that we focus on, because as I said, we put a lot of thought into this about where is a place that we can focus our efforts to get the most bang for our buck, to be able to give people a tool to reduce emissions. But also, we know that it's really challenging, having run a green business, to be able to do this, because the technologies that you're using sometimes are more expensive than others. And so getting other businesses and organizations to use them it should have incentives. And so we created what's called the Community Carbon Marketplace, basically to be able to pay everybody or organizations for every ton of carbon that they reduce by matching them up with other organizations and local governments that want to buy those carbon credits to be able to meet their own emissions targets, but when they can't do it internally. So it's a way of basically matching up people who are polluting and who can't adapt or adopt green technologies, and then taking that money and shifting it over to people who can, and basically subsidizing that activity to shift the economy in that direction. And so we've done that with a number of different communities. Duncan was the first community to become carbon neutral using community carbon credits purchased all from local projects. So that money goes right into the local economy to support green activities. 6,500 tons of CO2 reduced, over 160,000 invested into the local economy, and 7 carbon neutral governments. So 7 local governments are using this system to become carbon neutral. And we have a 4-phase program which basically goes into communities to be able to find what the potential is to reduce emissions in that community, and basically then, again, as I say, pay people to reduce their emissions. And here's just a testimonial from one of the communities, one of the community members, a nonprofit in Squamish. And the local government of Squamish has been using our system there in the last while to meet their carbon or their climate action objectives. So, some conclusions. Transportation represents the largest source of emissions that communities have the greatest potential to change. Biodiesel is a solution that can be implemented to immediately begin to reduce vehicle emissions and be part of that silver buckshot solution, but providing multiple renewable options, silver buckshot, and incentivizing their adoption, such as with carbon pricing, is key to achieving change. And I think we know from today that we need significant change. And I've ended, I think, on this so many different times, and it still applies. So that's the thought I'd like to leave you with today. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Brian. That's fantastic. Just before I go, I'd like to just also acknowledge that we've been joined today by other elected officials, Awesome to see Councillor Deborah Toporowski, Councillor Chris Justice from North Cowichan, and Councillor Jenny Capps from the City of Duncan. Thanks so much for joining us today. So our next presentation from Don Skerrick, who founded Viridian Energy Co-op, and it's a fantastic organization in the Valley and has of course moved its business beyond our Valley. My wife and I had 12 solar panels installed on our roof, and there's room for I think about 20 more. But we're very satisfied customers. It's really fantastic, especially during the summer months, to look at your solar panels' real-time energy generation and to see the resulting credit on your BC Hydro bill. And after seeing how well they work and visiting Peter Nix's solar farm earlier this week, I now can't help but, every time I drive past a house with a roof that's bare, just wonder, like, what about all that wasted space there? So without further ado, please welcome Don Skerrick to talk a bit about solar energy.
Thanks for inviting me, Alistair, and thanks everyone for coming. Alistair, you mentioned in your opening remarks that you wanted to be a natural resources minister, but now you ended up with agriculture critic. But isn't agriculture a natural resource also?
Oh, for sure.
So, we don't have, oh, I guess I got it. Sorry. Not used to this. Somebody made some changes to this, so this is the one that I have at home. So, welcome again, Don Skerrick. As Alistair mentioned, I'm one of the founding members of Viridian Energy Cooperative. We have 7 active members and a couple of members that aren't so active, and we're in the process of bringing a new member on from the Nanaimo. So now we'll be representatives in Souk, Cowichan Valley, Nanaimo, and Courtney. So we'll be servicing the whole island from these different places. Excuse me. We also do some commercial projects over in Vancouver Island. Bit of an idea what we are, and I noticed
Salt Spring by any chance?
We do Salt Spring, yeah, all the islands, yes.
Okay.
I include that on this island. But I noticed in the room there's actually quite a few people in here that have a solar system on their house. Could you put your hands up? Those that have them? Yeah. The Cowichan Valley, I think, is leading the way in solar. It's amazing how many systems that we've installed here. We're actually even ahead of Victoria, which is a bigger area than us. I don't know what slide I'm getting, so I have to look. Okay. So this is the first solar system. Probably most of us have all tried this solar project sometime in our lives. So. And still, some of us still do. Yes, exactly. In fact, I did my laundry this morning and it's on the deck. So yeah, but solar has advanced significantly from those days. But when we talk about, oops, something didn't come up there. When we talk about solar or renewables, the first thing that you really want to look into is conservation first. Before you think about putting a solar, make sure you've got good windows, you've got insulation, do all that sort of stuff, and then your solar is now going to be much more effective in reducing your hydro bill. But if you don't have good insulation or good windows, all that solar is just going out the window as fast as you put it in. So you're much better off spending your money on conservation. We always suggest that to people first when we're talking to them. When it comes to solar, one of the things that it always boils down to is dollars per watt. Everybody wants to know what the cost is. So dollars per watt To give you a bit of an idea, when we first did the first bulk buy system here, I think it was about 2013, 2014, the dollar per watt in those days was about close to $3 a watt. Now we're down in the $2.25 a watt. So in those few short years, it's dropped a third again in the mechanical costs of the equipment. We're dropping regularly, but it is starting to slow down. This is give you a rough idea of what a grid tie system looks like. You have your solar panels on your roof here, your electric car plugged in. So oops, I hit the wrong one there. Get too many. So the sun shines down onto your solar panels, produces the electricity. The electricity is transferred from, it's always produced from a solar panel, it's always produced in DC. And then it's immediately changed to AC. So that's what the inverter does. The inverter sits in behind the solar panel so you don't even see it. And so now we're transmitting DC power or AC power throughout your house, through the microinverters. That then comes down into your main solar panel, and electrons always take the easiest, shortest path. So if you're home using it, those electrons that you're producing are going to go to whatever you're using it on. If you're not home, then it's going out here to the grid, to your neighbors or whoever's closest to you. So remember, electrons always take the shortest path. Then when you're at nighttime, then you're bringing it back in, and the smart meter keeps track of all that. So on your hydro bill, when you have a solar panel or solar system, at the end of the month, hydro will tell you how much that you brought into your house and then how much that you sent out, and then you either have a credit or you have a bill at the end of the month. I just recently added 10 more onto my system, and now I've eliminated all my tier 2 costs on my bills. So solar panel innovation. Solar is continually innovating, as you can see from this sort of thing. It's been going around the internet quite a bit lately. Kind of a neat thing. At nighttime it folds right up, and in the daytime it opens up like a flower. Kind of a neat idea. We generally deal with Canadian Solar as our supplier of solar panels. And to give you an idea, I was just talking to Roger before the meeting, and he was one of the original ones on the bulk buy, and his panels are 235 watt. We're now up to 365, and it probably won't be long we'll be having 400 watt panels. But that's, so the efficiency is increasing on them all the time, but the other thing that's changing on them is that what we have, this one was called a split cell. And what they did is, on the split cell, is they cut the solar panel, the actual cell, they cut it in half, so that then the energy that's produced in each cell only has to go through half of a cell. So it makes each cell much more efficient. So that's what split cells are doing. So Canadian Solar was one of the companies leading the way on that innovation. Translucent panels, most of you have probably seen or heard of those. So you've got a sunroom here. It takes so many solar panels to fill it up, and then some of the sun is allowed to go through so that you can sit in the sunshine still, and you're producing solar at the same time. The bifacial ones they're relatively new. I think they're been on about 2 or 3 years. The difference being is that instead of just getting direct sunlight coming onto the face, it'll bounce off a cloud, it'll bounce off the earth, and it has a double layer of solar panels. So the underneath now has a solar cell built into it also, so it's collecting from both sides. Much more efficient, but they're only meant for like on a ground mount system, not like on a roof, because you're not going to get much bounce back off of your roof. So, but on any ground mount system, they're actually quite beneficial. Everybody's heard of the Tesla solar roof panels. Don't hold your breath on this one. We've been trying to get some information on it. It seems to be relatively new. They haven't really, I think they've installed about half a dozen of them. But we get asked regularly about them. So when, I don't know, maybe in another 5 years or something like that. But they continue to keep working on them. And they're not as expensive, or not as cheap as Elon has led them on to believe. Because if you go onto their website, there's an actual calculator you can use, and it actually turns out to be about 3 times as expensive. So don't hold your breath there. So, smart AC solar panels. All panels are, like I mentioned, are continually innovating. They originally started off here with just a simple diode and the connection. Then they added in a monitoring, so then now we could monitor, we could see what each panel is producing at home. Then they added in the safety. One of the things that we had to do a few years ago was add in a safety system that would automatically shut the inverter down so that it didn't backfeed into the hydro grid when the hydro went down. So that innovation was built into it. And then they added in the optimization. Optimization allowed that each panel could, if it was one panel was shaded, it didn't affect the operation of the other panel. And so that's what optimization did. And then the last one is longer strings. So now what we're able to do is now put longer strings. We can go up to 1,000 volts on one string of DC systems. And even the AC now would be allowing longer strings. So we can get more equipment on one circuit. So I mentioned earlier about solar panels dropping in price. You can see in you can see here almost $77 in 1977, and we're down to in the 36 range. Now that's manufacturing costs. I think we're still being able to buy them in the high 50, 60 cent range per watt. When that first bulk buy Roger and I were talking about earlier is that I think that first bulk buy was around 80 or 90 cents, maybe 85 cents a watt. So you can see just in a few years how much they continue to drop. And while they're dropping in price along the headline, they're dropping in price, you can see they're well under $1 now. But the efficiency has dropped. Back in 2008, they were like 75 watts. Here we are in here, where Roger bought his 235 watt, and now we're at 365 watt, and it won't be long, and we'll be at 400 watts per panel. So the efficiency is always getting better on them. So this is a comparison of panel and install costs. So you can see back in 2011, the cost of the solar panel itself was more than half the cost of the total installation. And now up to 2000 in where we are now, roughly here, you can see the actual cost of the solar panel itself is probably only a quarter of what the total cost of the system is. They keep dropping substantially. So this is an interesting one. Grid parity, which was reached in 2017. The green line is the levelized cost of electricity. So in other words, the levelized cost of electricity is after a 25-year span, you're making an investment in a solar system. What's the effective cost of that electricity over 25 years? Right now, it's under 8 cents a kilowatt hour. People investing in a solar system, that's what they're buying. They're guaranteeing their electricity cost won't be more than 8 cents a kilowatt hour for the next 25 years. But you can see way back here, it used to be in 2012, it was 30 cents. In 2017, it crossed the line where hydro rates have been continually increasing. In fact, right now, this is our tier 2 rates are pretty well exactly 15 cents when you take what the basic rate is and you add the rate rider and you add the GST. It's pretty well 15 cents per kilowatt hour. So you can see the spread is quite significant now. That solar is quite a bit less expensive. In last month, I think it was last month, Alberta put out a call for tenders on a solar farm, and the cost for the effective cost of electricity was 4.8 cents a kilowatt hour. What companies were able to sell from a privately owned solar system to the Alberta regulator for us. And in Alberta, existing cost of gas generated, which they use a lot of in Alberta, or coal generators, is anywhere from 7 to 11 cents a kilowatt hour. So you can see solar is way cheaper than fossil fuels. So, energy before the Industrial Revolution. We relied on the sun for everything. And then we switched to coal. And coal got us through, the 1800s in that range. And then we went to the fossil fuels. And this is what we're faced with now. Is tar sands projects like this, or fracking and that sort of stuff. So we've got to move beyond that. And here's an example of a community moving beyond that. This is the city of Nelson. They installed what is called a solar garden in 2014, I think it was. A 60 kilowatt. What they did is they went to the community and said, who wants to invest in solar? They were willing to put the property forward to put a solar community farm together. And it sold out. They had a few community meetings, and it sold out within a week, something like that, from the people that were interested in buying into the system. And so now it's up and running, and the city of Nelson looks after the billing. And so, like, you might own, say, 3 or 4 panels in there. And what they do is they take the production from those 3 or 4 panels and they apply it to your hydro bill. So then you get the reductions. For people that live in apartment buildings or they have a house that's completely shaded, this is an ideal investment for people. You can get your hydro reduced. City of Nelson went ahead and did that. It seemed to have come to an end, I'm not sure. Well, partly because the net metering agreement changed, and I'll be talking about that in a minute. So what's stopping us? Why don't we have solar farms? Well, I think Brian mentioned that, or somebody, or Alistair mentioned that. Our illustrious government thought that it would be much better to invest in a pipeline that's going nowhere. So, when you take the, 14 billion or whatever that was, that's going to, by the time if they ever do finish.
They're not going to.
Well, we all hope that. And then we have the other government that's insisting on building Site C, which is another 7 or 8 or 10 billion dollars, which whatever it's going to be when we're finally finished. So those are 2 major government decisions that have affected it. This one in particular, if they go ahead with this, we're going to have a huge glut of electricity on the market. So there's no incentive for them to offer incentives for solar. Not that solar needs it. From the graphs that I've shown you, solar doesn't need an incentive. It's already proven itself. But this is where government could come in. And I know, Alistair, I know it's probably not in your bailiwick, but it's more provincial. But for politicians like you and the other politicians in the crowd, this is what we actually need. BC Hydro changed the net metering agreement about year, I mean, less than a year ago, a few months ago. So now you're no longer allowed to surplus, produce surplus, like the big farm that Peter Nix put in, 192 panels. Those type of farms are no longer allowed. You can put in as much solar as you want as long as you're net zero. But hydro doesn't want to have to write you a check. They don't want you investing in solar. You can be net zero, but that's all you can do. The other thing was no sharing within your business. Well, if a business could, had a nice roof and they could put it on the roof and then apply it to their residential rates, which is quite a bit higher, you can't even do something simple like that. Or like businesses that might have a strata thing, they can't divide it up. Or like a townhouse or condominium project, they can't put a big farm on and then have it divided up amongst all the members like they did in the Nelson.
What's the reason behind this?
I'll get to that in just 1 minute. And then we have no community energy initiatives. What that means is that, to solve that problem is a fairly simple thing, is a thing that's called virtual metering. And all it is, it's a software program, and all BC has to do is go buy it. And what it does is that when you produce it, or when you build a solar co-op farm, then the virtual metering will take into effect that there's 20 people on that farm, and they'll take the percentage that you own, and they'll take it off the total generation of it and then apply it to your bill. So it doesn't need to go through your meter, it can go through like any meter, and then the software program just divvies it up into your own account. Simple software, it's available in the States, you can buy it. Some of the jurisdictions down there have it, but try to convince BC Hydro to allow that. It doesn't seem to be going anywhere. The other thing that they could do is increase the size of the net metering so that we can go now and now go more than what we can produce. And then that would encourage people to make more investments in it. The more people that put solar on, I don't understand BC Hydro's thinking, but the more people that put solar on, the more green energy they have available to export to California. Mm-hmm. They get they keep the carbon credits for it, so they have more carbon credits. They save 10% in transmission fees, or not fees, but in losses. From those hydro dams up in the north, they lose 10% of the energy just getting it here. So if you can produce it on your house, hydro is saving 10%. So the economics are just, it's not the economics that's holding it back, it's more political will. The other thing I would say is, if the government wants to help, is to not give outright grants. It's better to give an incentive where you get, like right when they were putting out paying so much a kilowatt hour, they were paying 10 cents a kilowatt hour. If they would increase that to 15 cents a kilowatt hour, that would encourage more people to invest in it. It would still be a net zero because we're paying 15 cents and they're giving us 15 cents, so it isn't costing anybody anything. Sorry, the other thing. And so then the grants, what happens with grants is that they'll put them in for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then what happens is that all kinds of companies start up and the prices go up because now you got all these grants. So the prices go up. Nobody gains anything except a whole bunch of contractors come in, competition all over the place. And then the grants end, and then everything dies because it was built on false hope. So we don't really need that. All we need is just we don't even need the 15 cents. It would be nice if they put the 15 cents on, but okay. So anyway, if that's yeah. So this is what would happen if we put it on. 20 billion investment, 13 gigawatts of solar energy, 15 billion kilowatts. Anyway, I won't. Sorry. Conservation first, real government support, democratized energy supply, community investment in solar and summer hydro and wind. The two go together hand in hand. Thank you very much.
It's easy when you're passionate about these things. I just wanted to add, I missed the fact that Councillor Carol Newington from the city of Duncan, sorry, I missed you. Thank you for coming as well. Moving on, for our next panelist, I'd like to welcome Tom Hackney from the BC Sustainable Energy Association to come up, please.
Thank you, Alistair, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're having an interesting time. I'd like to switch gears a little bit. Dawn and Brian have been doing great work producing actual energy solutions that you can employ. And I'd like to switch focus a bit to what the role of governments may be in supporting this to happen and putting the structures in place, and in particular, given our member of parliament and his question, the role of the federal government. So I represent the BC Sustainable Energy Association, and our mission and our vision is to see the whole of BC switching over from our current fossil fuel dominated energy use to one that's completely renewable energy. We're a small not-for-profit organization, member supported. We do a bunch of things such as going into schools and educating people about sustainable energy and climate issues so that they can put pressure on their parents to do the right thing. We intervene in front of the BC Utilities Commission, which regulates BC Hydro and the utilities, and we advocate for more of the net metering kind of solutions that Dawn was discussing. And we also have what we call the 100% renewable energy by 2050 initiative for municipalities, and I think that's especially topical for today with the question of a federal energy plan. And our group strongly supports having a clean energy plan at the national, provincial, and local levels. So what I'm talking about here, this is 100% renewable energy is kind of a way to market the 80% or more greenhouse gas emissions reductions that the scientists say we need to destabilize our climate. People seem to get more enthusiastic when they talk about renewable energy, where they get a bit gloomy when we talk about greenhouse gas emissions. Anyway, the initiative is meant for the whole community, so transforming the whole of society, not just the government operations. And it is intended to be a strategic objective to getting to zero for emissions and 100% for renewable energy. And so 100% renewable energy, this is a doable thing. There is credible academic research work, a challenging objective, but it can be done, and we should do it. And people all over the world are starting to get on the bandwagon to push this forward and make it happen. So we have the Go 100% Renewable Energy Mapping Project. These are commitments by cities, municipalities, and governments of countries. At the Paris Accord, there were commitments by about 1,000 mayors to adopt targets of this kind. City of Vancouver in 2015 has adopted the objective 100% renewable energy by 2050. Here on the island, Victoria, Saanich, and Central Saanich are also pushing forward on this. And we just have the provincial government, which has come out with a new and considerably improved clean energy plan, or it's, well, climate action plan that has a big clean energy component to it. No, we don't need that one. So this is where we need to go. The three bottom lines, the coal, the brown on the bottom is coal, then the pink is oil, and the orange is natural gas. Makes up about 75% of our energy use right now. And according to this National Energy Board forecast, we're going to stay about the same out till 2040. And that is unless we change. And this is where a clean energy plan comes in, and where you as voters come in and support those policies and actions and visions for a change. So what can the federal government do? I'd say there are 6 areas: spending, interprovincial transportation, international trade and treaties, environmental protection, national standards, economic planning. I'll focus on spending. I think I'll try and shorten this. I think we've been talking too much. Anyway, the federal government has the biggest budget by far in the country. Their power to spend money on projects is bigger than anybody else's, and so this is probably one of the most important things where they could spend money in the right ways and avoid spending it in the wrong ways. So, first of all, please apply green screen to all federal spending related to greenhouse gas emission targets. Infrastructure boondoggles, and just point out, it's very easy to get into spending money on yet more highway interchanges, airport expansions, a new transmission line up into the northwest of BC, and things like that. If these are properly screened in relation to a climate action plan, I think we would see a lot less of this and a lot more things like subsidies to renewable energy, like a feed-in tariff, more support for public transit, and more for support for building efficiency upgrades, which I'm glad to see the federal government is doing a bit of. And this kind of support and aid in relation to, say, buildings, homeowners can cut out their use of fossil fuels entirely with heat pump technology. Also, I understand ground source heat, which is rather than sucking the energy out of the air and bringing it into your home, you can suck the energy out of the ground itself or out of a convenient body of water. Incredibly efficient, like 300%, 500% or more. So the technology is there. We need to start deploying it, and governments can help. So I think I'm going to leave it there. There's lots of other things you can do, but I think let's keep the focus on spending in the right way. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Tom. Next, I'd like to invite up Bob Conybeare. Bob has had an entire career's worth of experience in the oil and gas sector, and we've had a lot of conversations about this, and I'd like to invite him up to talk about some of his perspectives on the best ways that we move towards reducing our carbon imprint in the atmosphere. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Alistair. All right, oil and gas industry, that's way. Let's go, man. But my interest is in, because we have a real problem with carbon. And I understand problems, and we do have a huge problem with climate change. Carbon dioxide is the problem. And there are 3 main sources of carbon dioxide. and one is in the transportation industry. The other is in electrical production, and the other is heat. And those are the major portions of energy production that we all use and need. And we have a growing population, and all of those things are growing. So my interest, is I've been retired for about 30 years, and so I had lots of time to play with this thing and to find something that is actually economical to change. So I looked at all three sectors, and I'm going to give you my summary of what I found. First, the transportation sector. Now, we all use cars, and our focus to change there is on electric vehicles. The problem with just electric vehicles is that they're too expensive, they have range problems, and then they only, which is caused by the battery, basically. Battery technology is not up to replacing the fuel vehicle. But there are replacements that are likely, not even likely, but here today. And that is the plug-in hybrid, or both hybrids. There's two types of hybrids. One hybrid has a small battery and an engine, and the second is plug-in hybrid, which has a larger battery. And then you go to the electric vehicle itself, which has a very large battery. But if you look at the amount of mileage that each of us drive in Canada every year, which is about 19,000 kilometers, it means that we use about 52 kilometers a day that we drive. So the battery size that we need to drive that is an average maybe in the 10 kilowatt size. The electric vehicle itself, you need at least a 60 kilowatt battery, average. It varies from 25 to 100 in a Tesla. So you're talking a lot of money and a battery that only lasts 8 years, maybe 10 if you're lucky. So you have to replace it. It's the most expensive part of the electric vehicle cost. So what happens is that we would reduce, each of us drivers with a plug-in hybrid, would reduce our cost to drive, the operational cost, about $1,500 to $2,000 a year. Now you multiply that by what? 2.5 million here in BC, or 10 times that in Canada, and that's an awful lot of savings. And it goes into everybody's pocket. It's not government or anything else, it's just up to those who buy and use that type of vehicle. So how do you get there? Well, virtually every automobile company, manufacturer, makes plug-in hybrids now. But most people don't even know what a plug-in hybrid is because the auto companies aren't interested in selling those things, right? Because they last a long time. Because you have an engine that's running maybe 20% of the time in its sweet spot, so it'll last maybe 2-5 times longer than today's engine. And then you have an electric motor that has about a 30-year life. So you have a vehicle that, at least the train operation of it, is a long time compared to, what, maybe 12 years on the average vehicle. But, the vehicle range on the road is about 12 years. And that consists of new vehicles, which are about 7 to 8 years old, and then second-hand vehicles for the rest. So it would take, if we had a really goal to change our vehicles, we could do it in 12 years. Because we buy new cars every year at about a rate of 175,000 in BC. In Canada, it's about 1.9 million vehicles every year. So we could change that with a really aggressive program. But just the plug-in hybrid is not the only thing. We could combine it with the electric vehicle, because that's where it works today. The electric vehicle is the second car because of its range problems. And that's the niche that it fits now. And my own calculation, if you had a 60% with plug-in hybrids, 40% electric vehicles, we could reduce our carbon by 88%. 88% is a very significant amount of fuel reduction. It would change our whole country. Not only this country, but every country. Because using those vehicles and having them made regularly by all our vehicle manufacturers, and they would switch because the demand is there. So it's quite viable, I think. 12 years is aggressive, but I think it's doable. And we here in BC have a perfect position here because we have a carbon tax. It provides enough money on a yearly basis to give us now a $7,500 rebate for people buying those vehicles. That's a pretty impressive amount. It's probably more than it costs the manufacturer to make. The problem is to make sure that the manufacturer doesn't get the money, that it actually goes. So the administration of the things is important. We've had that carbon tax in service here for 11 years now, since it passed. The Clean Air Act passed in 2008, and followed by the carbon tax. We've taken in about $10 billion in carbon tax money in that time. We're spending on rebates on vehicles now about $45 million a year, total. I mean, so we're not using the money for what it's supposed to be for. The money is for reducing carbon. We can use our cars, buying the proper one, and reduce carbon. It's here, it's available, it's just not used. So that's the answer really to the transportation system. Overall, if you look at the longer term picture, we could reduce, if you reduce fuel consumption by 88%, what happens to the oil industry? What happens to the pipelines? We change, there's about 88 million barrels a day produced of crude oil. Change it down to 20, 25. And this is possible within the 12 years is pretty optimistic, but 15 to 20 years, this is not hard. And it would put money in everybody's pocket. This is money for each of us. Increase your spending. Maybe even some savings. But that's my answer to the transportation section. I want to briefly talk about the other two parts. Electricity. Electricity, the fossil fuels, electricity in Canada in particular could be switched. But I'm not a real big fan on solar panels. They help. Wind farms, they help. The problem is when there's no sun or there's no wind. So what do you do? So that's what I focus on, is what do you do with that part? Well, the common philosophy is to, use the grid, use batteries. But where does the power come from that? And my analysis is it's very difficult. The ultimate answer is you're going to do it without power, or you need your fossil fuels to provide the constant power need. And that power need is increasing because of plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles. It's going to bump up that electricity. And if there's any, especially on the electric car side, transportation system, goes to electric, which it will, and it should. If anything's used during the day, it's going to bump up the power system. We're going to need more power plants. More Site Cs, zero carbon. Site C, for instance, will last 100 years. All these other things, they don't have that lifetime. So, but there's one other option that's never mentioned, nuclear. Most people go nuclear when they hear that. Really, it's the thing, the new design nuclear doesn't have the problems that everybody's so concerned about. And in particular, we're looking at Gen 3 or Gen 3 Plus that's available today. Probably construction time in the 10-year period. And you have no carbon. So you still will have the problem with radioactive materials. But the new designs use a lot, they're much more efficient, so you have less of those materials to handle. I was reading an article the other day, the amount of materials per year amounts to 1 can of Coke. Now, I don't have no idea if that's right or not. I prefer to really be careful with those things. But the amount of materials that we need to dispose of is manageable. And we have to weigh that against the damage that's done to our whole country from climate change. Nuclear doesn't have that problem. In Canada, most of our carbon is produced in Alberta. So that's the place where you have to concentrate. And we should push to go to the nuclear scheme in Alberta. Change the oil industry, or the coal industry in particular. They produce about 6,500 megawatts of power from the coal industry in Alberta alone. And that's where we get our emergency power from when we here run out. It's about equal to what's our total production of nuclear is in Canada. So, our nuclear industry in Canada has been operational for almost 30 years now, without huge damage to the whole world. Okay, I got to run here. So nuclear, is really important, and it's part of the consideration. It works all the time. It has a capacity factor in the 90-95% range, and it's the cheapest. We're looking at about 9-cent kilowatt hour for probably in the 60 to 90 year range. So it's really viable. I want to talk about just a brief thing about heat. Heat is a big, but probably the lesser of all of us, heat for the house. We have the means to change our buildings, how they're built, to reduce our energy consumption in the losses in the building by 50 to 80%. They're called SIPs, structurally insulated panels. They're panels that are made in a shop. They're CAD designed and cut, and they're put up in a normal house will go up in maybe 2 days by 3 or 4 people. It saves an awful lot of energy. The energy used, that 50 to 80%, is for the life of the building, which is in the 80-year range. But the bigger thing there is that it uses a lot less wood, in the 70% range. That means we don't need to cut down our forests. This is a heck of a change, and a very influential thing that nobody understands or seems to care about. And the cost for these buildings. They've been around for about 80 years, and the cost is almost the same as a regular wood building, where they call them stick-built buildings. So this is a very important feature, but it takes a lot longer to change, because you know, your house is good for 60 to 80 years. So changing them, but all the new ones, if you convert to that, it saves a lot of energy, and that's what we're here for. So I got to leave it at that. So I thank you very much.
And last but not least, I would like to welcome up Guy Dauncey, who I think many in this room are familiar with, who's written several books and really enjoyed his presentation when we had him in Shawnigan Lake, but I'll let you take it away. There's your clicker.
Hey, greetings everyone. If we were here for a couple of hours, I've got disagreements with all three panelists. We had some long discussions on things. So the power of, I gotta actually come right out here, so that normally there's a screen I can look at. There we go. The power of, the key to all this is the power of our vision has to be stronger than the power of our fears. I've been working in climate change for 25 years, and it doesn't work just to go on about how bad everything's going to be. People switch off. They need to be excited by a vision of where we're going. So are we looking at the future looking like this or like this? You know, like this or like this? And I do this with young people, and it's clear the way they're thinking, what they want, the kind of future they prefer. It's a no-brainer. The question arises, you know, how come GDP in economic growth really means gross depletion of the planet these days? It's a basic, more correct analysis of what GDP stands for. So there's the climate change in a tiny summary. Look at our global temperature and the dramatic speed of increase of temperature because of the sudden industrial revolution, burning fossil fuels, clearing forests, stuff like that. That's fundamentally what's going on. It's very dramatic. And there is no scientific dispute around this one. It's really frustrating. We have an impulse in humans. We always want to be right. It's just one of those things. It's a competitive impulse that comes to our thinking. And if people, you know, lock onto the corner of the internet that says that climate change is a scam caused by the Chinese or whatever, they believe they're right. They can find evidence to believe that, but it's really destructive
It's a
thinking.
scam, it's not portrayed by the Chinese.
So right?
It's a scam, it's not portrayed by the Chinese.
Well, let's not go into this. Trump said it was caused by the Chinese, or the Chinese said it was caused by Trump. The last time the world was 3 degrees warmer, and we're heading for 4 or 5, the sea level was 25 meters higher. Not inches or feet, but meters. And Duncan is one of the places extremely vulnerable to disaster because of all this, along with the whole lower mainland. We have the increase in dramatic forest fires when the August is now sort of Schmorgast, when, you know, we're getting used to it every year, with smoke and stuff like that. We've had an 80% decline in Arctic ice since 1980, so we've got a real choice which way we go. So we had this kind of choice before. In 1890, the problem in our cities was horse dung on the streets because all our transportation was by horse. By 1920, we all drove cars. It was just called an energy transition. There's nothing scary or difficult, it's a technological shift. We have to make that shift, and really rapidly. So we've got these two possible futures. If we stay with business as usual and more tar sands and more pipelines and more liquefied natural gas and more coal exports, we're heading for a real breakdown of culture. That's the reason why the students were on strike yesterday. And we can have a vision that is so positive, as Brian was pointing out. You know, even if it turns out this science is wrong, we do all this stuff, we get a beautiful future out of it. The planet needs you to give a shit. We are entering some very serious time of change right now. Greta Thunberg said to who led the world, you know, student climate strike, said to the European Union, the target they have, which was for a 40% reduction by 2030, is not sufficient to protect the future for children growing up today. If the European Union is to make its fair contribution to stay under 2 degrees, we need an 80% reduction by 2030. Twice as fast as planned under, you know, the lowest Paris reduction thing. In London, the Mayor of London declared a climate emergency, and basically they're looking at, Oslo has committed to slash emissions by 95% by 2030. Yes, which means, and part of this is, we cannot have any new fossil fuel infrastructures. We cannot have more liquefied natural gas, which the NDP in British Columbia has agreed to, which new NDP leader has agreed to. We can't have in pipelines, we can't have that stuff. Sven Robinson, who's running to run for the NDP, is saying the most important issue is climate change. We have to effectively put the country on the same kind of wartime footing as we did at the time of the last World War. There can be no new oil and gas infrastructure. This is the concept behind the climate emergency motions that are being passed now by a whole slew of cities. I haven't got them up here yet, but there's London, England, Edinburgh, about 400 local municipalities in England, Los Angeles, Vancouver, the CRD, and last week the Gulf Islands Trust, 100% unanimous vote to declare a climate emergency with the goal of 100% carbon neutral by the year 2030. What carbon neutral means is that if you reduce your emissions by 90%, you need to find the remaining 10% by doing changes to forestry practices and farming practices that will absorb those 10% emissions into the soil and the trees. That's the meaning of carbon neutral. This is the new target. Anything for 2050 is basically saying, how many of you are planning to be active and alive in 2050? Hands up, please. One at the back, you're kidding me. So look, it doesn't mean anything to have a goal for 2050. It means someone else's responsibility. It's the 2030 goals that matter. I'm really looking forward to the day, hopefully within the month, that the CVRD and Duncan and North Cowichan will be voting to share the same climate emergency motion, so the whole of the South Island is on board for what it takes to do this transition. Basically, it's not a complicated game. There are 5 fundamental solutions to the crisis: 100% renewable energy, phasing out industrial meat, restoring Earth's forests and stopping clear cutting, eco-sequestration of the carbon through changed forestry and farming practices, and building a restorative economy with a whole bunch of components. So how are we going to do this in practice? And I put the whole plan together with about 100 different actions about 2 years ago, but it's not much changed. Number one is we have to promote climate leadership engagement. To get community people involved, not just in sort of coming to meetings to sort of complain, but to clarify the vision. So it's not just a few people and bureaucrats or Suzuki Foundation people saying, here's what we need to do at the policy wonk level, but we're all engaged in the vision of what needs to happen. 2, we need to declare climate emergencies all over Canada and plan for 100% carbon neutral across the country by 2030. There's Churchill saying, it's no use saying we're doing our best. You have to go to succeed in doing what's necessary. So our best is, we have to go a long way. So there's CRD declaring climate emergency, joined by the Gulf Islands Trust recently. Victoria voted to go 100% renewable. By 2050, they need to bring that forward to 2030.
We're going back to horse dung.
Sorry?
We're going back to horse dung.
Yeah, well, I didn't think so. We'll come to that. Number 3, targets, policies, regulations for 100% energy for electricity by 2030. This is not a provincial problem. Our electricity in BC is already, in effect, 100% renewable. When you install solar today, you are actually offsetting hydro or wind. The purpose of installing solar today is that when we have the massive expansion of electricity need because of the electric vehicle revolution and heat pumps, we will need that electricity for the future. So by going solar, you are investing in the future electricity needs of our province. Right now, any surplus energy is being exported to California for 2 or 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So BC Hydro is generating too much power, losing money on that power. That's why they don't want to subsidize solar, because any subsidy is just a guaranteed loss to the BC Hydro system, which means higher prices for all of us. But within a couple of years, if we get on board with the speed change, we're going to need all that electricity. Your installation of solar will be a valuable contribution to the future. Targets the same for sustainable transportation by 2030. So this begins with cycling. How many of you have ridden an electric bike? Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're in a little club here. We know that when you get an electric bike and you come to a hill and you press the electric drive, woof, you sail to the top of the hill with no muscle pain. You destroy gravity. So anyone saying, oh, well, I can't do bicycles because of the hills, forget it. Electric bike solves that problem. And for those of us with grey hair, it's called an electric tricycle. And there's going to be a big market for them. We can all get around quite happily. They're way faster than they need to be for safety purposes. You can be doing 30 kilometers an hour quite happily on an electric bike, which is faster than you should be doing. And the massive market for total, and the amount of electricity used on electric bicycles is like peanuts worth. It's really nothing. Then the safe separated bike lanes. That is a very, very low cost safe separated bike lane. You haven't got to have these massive $1 million studies. You just paint the lines on and put these plastic bollards in. It gives you a lot of the structural safety you need while getting started until you get proper safe separated bike lanes. Electric buses, they cost more to buy, they cost less to run, they pay for themselves over their 12-year life. Barcelona has set the goal that by 2020, every bus in the city will be electric. BC Ferries, by the way, has got a consultation going on right now to say, what should our future ferries be? I believe if you go to the website, you can find out. All of our smaller distance ferries should be electric, not liquefied natural gas. For electric cars, Norway is already 50% of all new vehicles in Norway are electric. Not plug-in hybrid electric, full electric. They're not having any of the problems that Brian and Bob have talked about. They're not having range problems, they're not having cost problems, they're making it work. And so, I think I had more on electric cars. Where's it all gone? This is the previous. You didn't put my new presentation in. Gosh
When
darn.
you sent me it, I think
I sent you the new one. Gosh darn. Let me just go back up a bit on
Apologies.
transportation. Because there's more of this. I'm in the process of buying an electric Kia Soul at the moment. A brand new luxury model with a sunroof costs $42,000. You get a $5,000 provincial subsidy. You get a $6,000 scrappage subsidy for an old car. And you get an additional $4,000 subsidy from Kia. So the total cost to me is about $32,000. On a line of credit, which anyone who owns a house can get for free, that costs me around $40 a month to service. The energy savings, a regular car is going to be costing me $120 a month. So by taking out the money on the line of credit, not having a cent in the pocket, I can service the line of credit quite happily. And of course, you're selling your original car, so that's another $10,000 to $15,000 off the cost of the electric car you buy. You can also buy second-hand electric cars, the Nissan Leaf, for between $15,000 and $25,000 right now. You go to Motorise up in Sydney, they're available on the market. The range is, in the 150 to 200 kilometer range. The new car I'm getting is up to 200 kilometers. So either you have a second car, and the family, a lot of us do. Say you don't have a second car, but you're my neighbor. You've got a regular gasoline car. I say, would you like to borrow my electric car occasionally if I got a long distance? You're going to say, whoa, she's looking happy here. You just do a swap with the neighbor. And then you've got a long distance car. And so the price of batteries is falling dramatically. By 2025, the range for new cars will be around 400 kilometers, and the price will be the same as a conventional car. Everyone will be making the shift. Because how many of you have test driven an electric car? Hands up. Have you put your foot on the gas? Experience that acceleration? Whoa! You've got to treat yourselves, go and try an electric car. And it is the future. It's going to be the future.
And the Chevy Volt gets 500 kilometers.
Well, the Chevy Volt's got a little generator inside it. It's similar to what Bob's talking about. The Beaver Bolt.
Yeah, all electric.
It's fully electric.
Yes.
The new Tesla is 500 kilometer range. That's right. So every 3 or 4 years they upgrade the entire system and they increase the range phenomenally. So, this is absolutely the way it's going to go. And in terms of availability of plugging in, it's called your garage. You just plug into the garage for a steady overnight trickle, and then you've got a fairly charge in the morning. So this is the way to go. On the fact that Norway's already doing it. So on buildings, we need the same set of targets to get to 100% sustainable by 2030. And the simple technology of the passive house, which includes some structural integrated panels, basically 90% heat loss reduction on the passive house. So Friends of Victoria are building them. It costs about 4.4% more, but they have no heating bills whatsoever. And so you can roll the financing for what would have been the extra heating bill into the cost of the house. And that's the kind of, in Brussels, since 2015, they decided to tackle, the European Union said you've got to have zero net energy houses by 2020. They said, let's go passive solar. Within 4 years, they said all houses must be passive solar. Since 2015, every new building, large or small, has been passive solar throughout the city of Brussels. And their greenhouse gases from buildings are just falling off the cliff. They're just eliminating them every single year. They're also now requiring that every single building retrofit must go to the passive solar, to the passive house standard. So they're just wiping out the greenhouse gas emissions. In British Columbia, the goal has been set as zero net ready by 2032 with the STEP system. It's way too late. It's saying it's the next planner's or engineer's problem. I haven't got to do anything. It's way too late. We need 4 years only for municipalities to sort of upgrade the building code and say, let's do it. Annual increasing price on carbon with a carbon tax, that's acceptable. Eat less meat. 15% of the problem globally is industrial meat that we eat, so that's an issue for all of us. And then targets for industry, obviously I mentioned. Forestry and farming is really important because when you clear cut forests, you lose carbon storage in the soil. And you never get the deep soil capture of carbon. And the same goes with organic farming stores more carbon in the soil, and so does holistic grazing store more carbon in the soil, which is a topic we can't go into. So forestry and farming are an important part of all this. Building a green cooperative economy, so you're getting much more emphasis on supporting, for instance, if you're closing down a coal mine or changing stuff over, you have a transition plan for the workers, you're guaranteeing them support to find new jobs. When I did an analysis of this thing, I think I lost that particular comment to it, yeah. And work with other nations to get the same 80% reduction in emissions by 2030. But there's conflict in this. It's a struggle. People have to work on this stuff together. It takes everyone, all of us, to get engaged. Municipal level, schools level, provincial level, federal level. So I'd like to see our federal government the BC government and the Clean Plan said we'll have all new vehicles must be zero carbon by 2040. By 2030 is the kind of date we need to plan for realism. 2040 is like, forget it. The federal NDP could be doing the same thing with these confident numbers. I had a photo of an electric pickup truck I was going to show you, if I got the other slide. I had a photo of the Tesla 18-wheeler truck that's coming on the market. You can get pickups. You can deal with longer distances. The 1,000-kilometer distance is a very, 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 very rare occasion when you've got to travel 1,000 miles to the corner store. I mean, really exaggerating way beyond the realms of reason with that example, right? 98% of Canadians can manage. Sorry?
In between towns in northern Canada, between gas stations sometimes.
Yeah, 1,000 kilometers? No, it's not 1,000 kilometers because no girl's got 1,000-kilometer tank by definition. It's not 1,000 kilometers. You're bullshitting. And bullshit creates great biodiesel. I would admit to that too. So the future is electric with biodiesel is going to be useful in the interim because of some of the diesel truck transitions, but when the BC government's putting biofuel into its diesel, and the current's gone up to 8% I think at the moment, that is coming from palm oil plantations in Indonesia. And it is not trapped in a responsible manner. What Brad's talking about is local biodiesel, generated locally, which is a whole different story. But the international biodiesel is a very dodgy thing. So we're going to do this transition out of the age of fossil fuels into the age of renewables. It's one of those inevitable historical transitions. The amazing thing is that the age of fossil fuels only lasts 300 years. When we shift to the renewable energy era, it lasts 3 billion years until the sun starts turning into a black dwarf and disappearing. And every single year, the price of solar falls and the efficiency increases. The price of wind falls, the efficiency increases. The price of geothermal energy falls under the ground. The efficiency increases. Nuclear, the price keeps on increasing, I'm afraid. Nuclear is dying a death of market forces because it's getting more expensive. Whereas geothermal energy, large-scale solar thermal energy, hydro energy we have already, all of the studies show we can handle our whole grid with the existing forms of renewable energy that we have by integrating them carefully in some large battery usage. It's not a problem. When I looked at the jobs analysis of this for the whole of Canada, we lose 800,000 jobs and gain 1 million green jobs. In the process. It's a discomfort in certain places problem when you need to make sure you've got a proper fair transition, just transition for workers. It's not an overall generic problem. Mark Carney's saying that climate change is a $5 to $7 trillion opportunity for capital markets, the investments needed in this sort of thing. A colleague of mine in Germany who works for the World Future Institute, who's their senior economist, said that if the world's central banks, who have the ability to print money, which is what they did during the 2008 crisis, printed $300 billion a year, that would leverage the 1,700 year of private capital to get to $2 trillion a year of investment needed to get to the 2 degrees, to keep under 2 degrees. And using central banks to do that, Canada owns and controls its own central bank. But we don't use it for any purposes. We borrow market on the private market because the Bank of International Settlements told us to in 1974. We can use central banks to print money without causing inflation. It's another thing that the NDP could get ahead of the curve on, sort of start getting some discussion going on this. So basically, we've got a transition that's possible here, and it's up to all of us to make this thing happen. This is the novel that I put together, Journey to the Future, that shows what this story looks like in the year 2032, when everyone's engaged in building an amazing green future. And that's my personal website. I call myself a practical utopian, because we need to be practical and utopian at the same time. Thank you very much.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is we have probably about 12 minutes until it hits 3 o'clock. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open questions and comments until 3 o'clock, and then at that time I'm going to do a brief wrap up. So I will look for hands, but just be cognizant that we have 12 minutes, so I ask you keep your comments and your questions as succinct as possible, and same with the answers. So I'll just go by the first hand I see. Okay, Helmut. And if you could speak up, please.
Yeah, my name is Duncan. I think we missed, one big piece, of energy. That is, waste to energy. We have lots of waste still going into landfills. And if we treat this waste, it can be used, in industrial power plants with less, fossil fuel than natural gas. Changing our waste industry would be the way to do, and it can be done very quickly.
So just a comment?
Yeah.
Okay. Shimama?
I'm going to address the electric car thing. My car died on the side of the highway on December 23rd, and I really wanted an electric car, and I'm a frontline worker, so I don't have great credit, but a friend signed a loan for me, and I got an electric Leaf for $17,000, 2013, 50,000 kilometers on her, full battery charge, and I drove from Shawinigan today, and it used 14% of my battery. I can drive just about anywhere on this island, and there is places to charge all over the place. There's quick chargers if I need to, and there's a slow charge. I trickle charge at night while I sleep, and it costs me about $1 a day now. I have no maintenance, I have no fluids, I have no emissions. I can sit happily in a traffic jam with my heat seating and listening to my radio, knowing that I'm not going to be spewing anything up into the environment. I feel good driving it. And if I can do it, anybody else can too, because it really, I am the example of how you can change just by asking for help. And thank you to the friend that helped me. I also want to thank Helmut for that with the bio-waste. There's this home biogas digester that you can get for your backyard where you use your compost and water and creates methane. And then you get 3 hours of fuel every day to cook your food on. And it's just gas. And it sits in your backyard, and it's about 5 feet by 5 feet. That's it. And it's a home biogas generator. So anybody and everybody can do that little bit every time, and eventually we are like fossil fuel addicts. If we start just weaning ourselves off of it, it's eventually just going to go away. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a quick question for everybody regarding I've been trying to reduce my carbon footprint myself for several years, many years. But I know I'm not going to hit zero. We're still going to be eating, we're still going to be doing some things. So, carbon offsets on the island. Where can we buy carbon offsets on the island? Your own place? And I'm thinking really of forestry. Is there any information out there about that, or where could it go? I've got your name, so I can check with you.
Sure, I can answer that. So, if you want to get island-based carbon credits, then you can buy them through the community carbon marketplace. And right now, we're just in the process of upgrading our website. So the best way to do it is to call our office, and then we can go through a list of the different projects that we have. They're listed on the webpage, but the trading platform that we had was a prototype, and as I said, we're just in the process of upgrading that. Right. So call our office. And if I could say one thing very quickly, just about first of all, just to settle any kind of confusion. bullshit does not actually make good biodiesel. If it could, we would do it. But I guess my point would be that there are some places that are much greater than the range of electric vehicles. And I'm not saying that to say that electric vehicles aren't a good thing. What I'm saying is that a one-size-fits-all solution is not the case, right? So that's what the point I'm trying to make.
Brian,
Yes.
when I was a biodiesel user, the province decided to not allow us, that they decided to continue charging us that tax, the same as as on regular diesel. Is that still the case?
Yes. As a matter of fact, the province still charges a carbon tax on 100% carbon neutral biodiesel. And it's been a bane of our existence, since the start. We've had a monumental effort to get it through. We had a motion passed in the city of Duncan, which moved it to UBCM and was supported by Highlands, and it went to the Ministry of Finance that kind of batted it down with the same form letter that they've been using with us for a while. And finally, Sonia Furstenau brought it up in the legislature and was able to get Carol James to admit that they could in fact look at it if it was in fact 100% biodiesel. And there's no reason why we can't split like the petroleum product from the biodiesel part. And so what they've been saying is that because it's a blended fuel, like most of the fuel that's sold with the biodiesel component is blended, they can't separate it, but they sure are good at separating other things when they want to get the tax. So I think that's a kind of a false argument. So we're working on it. We're writing there's another kind of letter campaign going on. And as I said, Sonia was very good to get some admission of that in.
From what I've heard here this afternoon, from what I've read, carbon dioxide is a problem, yeah?
Yes.
Okay, what's your target level?
350 parts per million.
What?
350 parts per million.
350. What's the current number?
We're over 400.
800.
Not quite.
No, it's 420 parts. I'm talking about the capital. It's 420 parts per million. Yes.
Right. I have an article here from the former president of Greenpeace.
Oh, Patrick Moore. He's a climate denier, fossil fuel supporter.
Don't stop calling names here.
He's a fossil fuel supporter. He's paid by the fossil fuel
From what I
industry.
heard you said, you're a globalist.
I know him personally. He's paid by the fossil fuel industry.
Listen to what he says. Have you studied biology?
Yes.
Is carbon the building block of life?
Yes.
Of all life on Earth?
Yes.
And what he says, anything below 150, plant life dies. And if that happens, human life on this earth ceases to be.
No one's talking about going below 100.
Wow, bullshit.
Okay, come on. Let's keep the language.
What you have advocating is global genocide.
Come on, you're affecting the rest of us. Please sit.
Yes, just because you speak the language or...
Okay, thank you. We're going to go on to the next question.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to need a lot of energy for our electric transformation. I've been reading about thorium. Can anybody tell me on the panel there why? What's the problem with thorium nuclear production?
In a nutshell, all of the nuclear prices are rising while all the solar and wind prices are falling, so it's dying a death of market forces. Yeah. That's the bottom line. Even if it turns out to be really good, it's not financially viable in competition with wind and solar.
That's not right at all.
I quote Amory Lovins as my source on that.
Sandy and then.
Thank you. I just thinking about hydropower and comments that we're 100%, as Guy mentioned, 100% hydropower basically here. What happens when all the glaciers have receded, which is going to happen very soon? We're not going to have the hydro generation. I personally don't think we're going to have the hydro generation capacity that we have, say, today, within even 20 years. Does anybody have any comments on that?
Well, to your narrow question, certainly climate is changing, and that will affect our production of hydroelectricity. I'd like to encourage everybody here to think beyond the electricity system, because the real problem, in my opinion, for climate action is the 80% or so of energy use in this province and generally across Canada that we use that is fossil fuel powered as opposed to powered by our electrical system. So I'm not disagreeing with you that there's a problem there, but
I guess what I'm saying as the fossil fuel use goes down, which I totally agree with that. I rode my bicycle here today.
Yeah.
But as we need more electricity because we're having less fossil fuel, then there's the demand, and will the capacity be there, I guess is what I'm asking.
I think it's a huge, we're proposing big change. My formula is we need to cut our waste of energy in half and more or less double our generation of renewable electricity.
So my understanding specifically, I haven't got an analysis of how much of the BC hydro dams comes from glacial melt versus snowpack. We're going to get more moisture falling with climate change. There's going to be more evaporation, more moisture will fall in general. And to know the analysis of whether it's going to fall in the areas of the hydrological gathering for the dams and in what form, and whether, because snow obviously slows down the process of water flowing into the dams. I'm sure the studies have been done on that. I don't know, I don't think it's 20 years out, but the problem lies. It's a longer term problem, I think, because we're still going to get moisture falling. We're going to get more spring freshet from the winter rains, and so it could be that the summer period when the dams are low, which is exactly when solar is strong. But even the full amp of solar, I only got it to about 7% of our power needs for the whole province, even with every single roof. But then you can expand major solar farms, so the solar could be a major contribution before the rain started to fall. It's a very key point, and the hydro needs to look at very closely.
I also wanted to say that Alan and I have a biogas plant in our yard. If anybody wants to contact us about that, I'd be happy to talk to them.
Peter, you're going to be the last one.
Thanks, Alistair. Excellent discussion, and we see that these are very complicated stories and issues, but it's not going to be easy. I think I totally agree with Guy. 2030, we may not be here by 2050, okay? So we have to evolve past oil. I always wonder what some alien is looking down going, what are those crazy humans burning now? What are they doing? But some of these solutions should definitely be in our building code. And by the way, making the solar panels done, and I know I appreciate that you try to buy Canadian. No, ban them from China. We want our own industry in the hardware, and our own with our engineers and so on. Another solution is ethanol. Brian and I have talked about that. That ethanol could be used in nearly every gas car, and Brian can explain how that works. But we can't get any because it costs $1 million for the plant. Nuclear waste. Oh my Lord. We just read that SNC Lavalin and another company are the ones that are going to take care of the nuclear waste, and they're a highly corrupt company. We're talking Darlington, Pickering, etc. Nuclear waste, absolutely never. It's got to be gone, and it's poison. I just want to say 2 points. A lot of these things these issues are discussed with opinions from right, left, and center on Couch and Conversations, and you can go there and join in on the conversation. Let's not forget that we have an obligation to tell our local governments that we will not vote for those folks unless they start looking at these things, and we can do it with letters to the editor and face to face. And finally, we have a federal election in 10 months. Same words. If you don't do these things, we'll be able to say it during the debates, Alistair. You'll be up with a conservative and a liberal and probably a green person. If you don't start doing these things, just tell them. If you don't do it, I'm not going to vote for you, and I'm going to tell my friends and family to vote for you as well. So we got to get vocal, like the folks here. I'm speaking to the converted here, but I'm talking. What about all the rest of the people that say little about this but grumble? Thank you.
So if you just bear with me just for 5 minutes, one thing I just want to point out too, yes, I have the privilege of serving as my party's agriculture critic, and one of the really exciting things, Guy touched on it earlier, is developing policies that help implement agroecological principles in our farming. I've been reading this fantastic book by Eric Tonesmeyer. It's called The Carbon Farming Solution. And well-managed agricultural plots of land can sequester anywhere between 10 and 20 tons of carbon per year. And absolutely, like if we are increasing the amount of carbon in our atmosphere, and it's going to be going up. We've probably set off some feedback loops, so we have to find innovative ways of getting that carbon out of the atmosphere. One of them is well-managed forestry, but if we also look at well-managed agriculture, you put that carbon back in the soil. That soil has better ability to withstand droughts. It has better water retention, so if there's a flood, it's better able to withstand that. And it leads to just plain old better produce. Farmers with good, healthy soils report far better yields in organic farming methods. So that, as agriculture critic, that's a really fascinating, exciting policy topic that I'm involved in. Just to wrap up, I want to end with this fascinating organization called Iron and Earth. Iron and Earth is an organization that's made up of oil sands workers who are arguing that their skill set needs to be transitioned to the new energy economy, because that's the big question we have. We have so many workers that are involved either in coal, in oil, or gas, and if we don't bring about a solution that involves labor and shows that their skill sets are needed in the new energy economy, we are not going to make much progress. We can't be talking at these people, we have to talk with them. We have to show them that our future involves a place for them too. So don't take my word for it. Please watch this short video. It's 4 minutes when you'll hear directly from oil sands workers themselves as they make the case for transitioning out of their own jobs.
We are Iron and Earth, oil sands workers for renewable energy. My name's Liam, and I'm an oil sands worker myself. A fourth generation Boilermaker, I grew up on the BC coast and I'm passionate about protecting our environment. Hey, let's go, Jimmy. Good to see you, buddy. I've tried to find work in renewable energy, but year after year, the only jobs available to me are in the oil and gas sector. While leading industrial nations like China, America, and Germany are creating millions of green jobs, Canada just seems stuck on one idea: the fossil fuel economy. I think that needs to change, and I'm not alone. Many of my fellow oil sands workers are starting to think this way. People like Randall Benson, who has built a successful solar company creating jobs through training and installation.
There are 175 watts at standard test condition, which is 25 feet. I had to make a plan for me to be in this new renewable energy field.
We are skilled workers: electricians, iron workers, pipe fitters, boilermakers, carpenters, and many more trades. And we could easily transfer our knowledge to the green economy.
Well, what better way to inform the other side than to come from the workers already inside and ask them what they think? Like, I'm out here making a living and I enjoy it, but I still see a need for renewable energy.
A lot of them are really conflicted, myself being one of them. I think a lot of people would want to make that shift, actually.
Instead of having one egg in the basket, so to speak, we could have people doing what we have here, installing solar on roofs. That could put a lot of people to work, especially in those bust cycles when the oil and gas industry isn't doing so well.
If we had leaders, people with vision, we'd actually work towards a sustainable energy future.
With a new federal government and a booming global renewable energy sector, now is the time to harness the skills of Canada's oil sands workers. So join Iron and Earth and help us build a strong, vibrant, green economy for all Canadians. We are Iron and Earth, oil sands workers for renewable energy. Oil sand...
So good, we want to see
So,
it.
if we can just, go back to the slide.
And just so you know, solar panels work better in cold weather, right?
Welcome to being,
From
next one over.
Yeah.
Sunny weather.
And you can see, just to show you another headline, countries that actually pay attention to these policies have started to make their CO2 emissions come down. So with that, I would just really like to thank you. As you can see, there's no one solution. There's a variety of opinions on the topic, but I think there's a constant recognition that we do have to do something. I love Brian's analogy of the silver buckshot. It's not going to be one magic solution, but it's going to be a whole host of different policies working together. And whenever I see my children, that really reinforces the message. We have the potential to do this. We can't dwell on the problems. The problems are very big. We have to start looking forward to the solutions, understand that this is going to be a real economic drive for our country, that it can be done. And thank you for your participation in this. This is really fantastic. And thank you to my panelists. I'm sure they'll be around for some